Hi there, my name is Merdad. I'm one of the programmers working on the Streets of Fortuna. I've been responsible for a lot of the city generation aspects of the game. It's not every day that the team asks you to generate a late antiquity city from scratch. So this has been a very interesting and complex challenge that I've been working on for the last 2 years. So today I'm going to take you on a journey of how the Streets of Fortuna generation was developed and a peek behind the scenes of the complex algorithm that does it all. When we started, there were various ideas of how we are going to approach city generation. Thankfully, we had the city of Constantinople as a reference. That helped a lot to figure out what exactly we are trying to achieve. One of our main goals was to ensure that we are not locking ourselves into a city of 90-degree angles forever. This may be the case at initial launch, but we want to ensure that we will have 45-degree streets in the city in the future to create the feel and architecture of a historical city. I started to build the algorithm by first manually hand placing aspects of the city to get an idea of how the city will look like at the end. Historically, Constantinople had a main road called the Meze, a Greek word for middle, that ran from the palace all the way to the Golden Gate. So for generation, that's where I thought to start, to generate a point in space that becomes the palace, and then building the Meze going through many intersections until it arrives at its final point that becomes the main gate of the city. The Meze famously went through many plazas that were large structures that host many important locations, marketplaces, and gathering areas such as the famous Hippodrome. Side roads would branch out of these plazas, so that was the next natural step. This is followed by generating aspects of the city that run along the roads, such as the palace walls or the aqueducts. The next step was to place neighborhoods, which are composed of many smaller locations. It can be even an individual landmark location. We then fill up any spaces between the roads with neighborhoods until the city is full. This slowly determines the shape of the city. And the final step would be adding the border walls and building the palace area and any terrain that goes outside the walls, and even upgrading a section into a port area. Now onto the actual generation. Our first step was to build a grid that would support such a city. That's when our talented environment artist, Quinn, suggested the idea of dual grids, and they displayed it in these images. So the dual grid allows for generation of roads and neighborhoods in both 90 and 45-degree angles, allowing us to build those emergent and interesting roads and alleys with variety of turns that gives the feel and architecture that we were looking for. Let's now take a look at the actual implementation of these ideas. So we start by generating a dual grid. We then divide the grid into sectors that will be later used to load and unload parts of the city and also identify different parts of the city and everything inside them. We then generate the Meze. As you can see here, we are doing a randomized set of angles. We then place the plazas in middle of every Meze segment and then generate a variety of roads out of the mezes and the intersections of the plazas. What you see here is an initial attempt. This was of course very random and we required more structure. So as we continued working on generating the roads, we ended up with something more like this, which also had roads that defined the borders and gave an idea of the final shape of the city. If you take a closer look, you can see those small neighborhoods are generated alongside the roads. The reason we only see them in that area is because only the sectors around the player are loaded. Here, let's take a closer look. So here we can see that those neighborhoods are all running along the roads, each with their own color coding, which basically tells us what type they are. The connections between neighborhoods and roads are very important because we want to create a navigation graph of the entire city that allows the NPCs to find their way around. Here is a better look at what that graph looks like. I will show more of this later on. And so our generation algorithm for the roads has gone through many iterations, and at the moment it uses various different passes of road generation until it is completed. When there are enough passes and neighborhood placement, we end up with a complete city, like these loaded sectors that you can see. Currently, we are using only right angles for the generation. But as you saw earlier, the capacity for 45-degree angles is there. We just want to first focus on building the gameplay in this version of the city. And later on, we will add the rest of the angled roads. Now, let's take a closer look at the city in the actual game engine. Be aware that everything is very much still work in progress. Here is our player standing beside the maze of the city. Everything you see is completely generated. As you can see, the maze goes from one plaza to another. Now let's zoom out a bit and get a bigger picture of the scale of this city. What you see is only a part of the city that has been loaded around the player. There are a variety of debugging tools we have created to observe the city. Let's see the generated maze in its entirety. As you can see, it goes further into the unloaded area. And let's see the plazas. This city currently has 4 plazas. And here are the roads that branch out into smaller and smaller roads to construct all the blocks that are filled with neighborhoods. And here are all the neighborhoods, and each is, as I said, color-coded to be easily identifiable. And finally, let's take a look at the navigation graph of the city. This massive graph connects the maze to the plazas, to the major roads, all the way to the smaller roads and alleyways, all the way to each neighborhood and locations within them, and even to each individual room and doors. The graph nodes are each identified and even show when a door is closed or not, identified by a red dot, as you can see here. We use these nodes to trace the NPC's path through the graph. There are a lot more other facets of the city generation, like how we generate neighborhoods and locations, how we create NPCs and generate items for them, and how we decide what goes where, and a lot of cool, exciting tools that we will cover in future. So, stay tuned for more Streets of Fortuna devlogs.